Yes. Yes. Okay. More kudos for Sam and the Wine Shop Singers. I just got the feeling that they have a lot of work ahead of them. That it's going to be almost better to hear Francis's words sung than even read them. And I kind of see like Bach oratorios, but with the melodies you're developing. It oozes in a way I think that just reading doesn't ooze in. And it was done in such a skilled way. I know you people are used to it, but I really think it's cool. Really good. All right, so I promised you words of inspiration to start each of these discussions. I go back to the church ladies with typewriters. They comment on a wide range of phenomena, including even things like marriage. Here's the announcement. Ladies, don't forget the rummage sale. It's a chance to get rid of those things not worth keeping around the house. Bring your husbands. And of course they have great words about the function of religion in Western society. This appeared in one newsletter. Don't let worry kill you off. Let the church help. And Wine Shop Singers, this is for you. This is written. Miss Charlene Mason sang, "I will not pass this way again," giving obvious pleasure to the congregation. Doesn't fit though, does it? And they have predicted the problem society would have with Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia. This appeared in an announcement. Next Thursday, there will be, for those of you who have children and don't know it, we have a nursery downstairs. And another Wine Shop Singers reference from the ordinary churches. It says, next Thursday there will be tryouts for the choir. They need all the help they can get. And back to marriage. Irving Benson and Jessie Carter were married on October 24th in the church. So ends a friendship that began in their school days. Love these guys. Then a little bit now more from Zen Judaism. Be here now. Be someplace else later. Is that so complicated? And then something I really liked that is attributed to Adi Irani. It's very instructive. He said, the only difference between an advanced soul and an ordinary soul. The ordinary soul is drowning in 2,000 feet of water. The advanced soul is drowning in 2 feet of water. Is that good, huh? Yeah. So, Mayor Baba goes for the, as we say in American baseball, the home run. That is he's interested in getting you to God as quickly as possible. Not so interested in getting us caught on the planes of consciousness. Too tempting. I forgot to tell you. The title of the morning talk was not an accident. The notion of the clueless aspirant, which has been me constantly. Never really being able to figure out what Baba was up to. Stumbling around, and yet being able to do at least something. Now, I got overconfident. It's just so embarrassing. So, Meherba was in seclusion, really in seclusion. But since my letter about LSD got a response, I figured, might as well keep writing, right? So I started asking a lot of dumb questions. One of the questions I wrote was, it was the time when people were getting interested in cryogenics, you know, freezing the body just before physical death and then hoping that in the future they'd thaw them out and fix them. And so I wrote to ask what happened to the soul or personality in such cases. You know, does the astral or subtle body just hang out waiting for the thaw? Or would a new soul enter the thawed-out body if revived? And audience, he said, do not ask irrelevant questions. He yelled at me. P.S. The answer to your question is, in the situation you describe, the person freezes to death. God, unbelievable, unbelievable. So, one story I forgot, probably because I repressed it. It was also embarrassing. Occurred at kind of this time of the day. And you can kind of understand after you've had lunch and you're kind of nappy and you're sleepy. It was at the end of one of my tours, after the pie incident at that university. And I was to speak to the philosophy class of an all-girls school near Boston, Massachusetts. And it took place in the basement of this building. The girls all had very soft chairs. It was a posh school. And I had a soft chair myself. And they weren't given any introduction. And so I was trying to make it kind of fit in with philosophy. And about halfway through, I realized that I was getting sleepy. Right, Freddie? Just like that. He's so tuned in. Wait till you hear what happens. So it doesn't worry me too much. I mean, the girls are the girls, and they're at least paying attention, seemingly. And I don't worry because just the fact that I realize I'm getting sleepy, you know, you expect the surge of adrenaline. Well, it went on, and the surge didn't come. And I was getting sleepier, and now I was really starting to get worried. And I said, but no, don't worry. I mean, going to sleep while talking would be the most embarrassing thing ever. So I'm sure that my panic, my anxiety, well, like, it didn't work. And now I'm starting to speak very, very slowly. And I'm just trying to keep it together and putting words together about philosophy and like this. And then I must have lost consciousness. Because the next thing I knew, I was being shaken by the Baba lover who had taken me there. I said, what's wrong? You fell asleep and you were still talking. I said, what? Oh my God. But then I looked out and all the girls were glazed out. They weren't moving. And I suddenly realized what happened. As I was falling asleep, I was using my hypnotic, I do hypnotherapy, my hypnotic monotone right after lunch. And they were all gone. They're all gone. And I said, oh my God. There were no faculty there. I said, what am I going to do? I could possibly be jailed for this. or child abuse or something like that. So I'm looking around, and my friend opened the window so fresh air would come in. I'm sitting there, they're all like this. So I gotta get them out of this. But I can't do it the ordinary way because I didn't want the faculty to hear that I'm doing a hypnotic waking exercise because they might wonder why. So I started then renewing my talk about drugs and said, there's 5 things you need to know about drugs. And when we get to the 5th thing, you will wake up to the dangers of drugs. So I went through 5, it does this, 4, it does this, 3, 2, and finally, 1, you now can wake up to drugs, yes. And they all opened their eyes. They were looking, and I said, thanks, you've been a great audience. And I got out of there as fast as I could. It was frightening. Some people do not believe that story, but it actually happened. It actually happened. I didn't call back to the school to see how the girls had taken the talk. Then I did, we will go back a little bit to the drug issue. I want to read you something that Francis had said early on, interestingly, way earlier than the times I was talking about. But I want to tell you another story, that because it kind of relates to what Baba is doing with the religions of the world. At least I hope it's symbolic. And this happened a while ago, several years ago. I had been visiting my family in Rochester, New York, and was on my way to California. And the plane stopped in St. Louis, Missouri, which is in the middle of the country. So I get out, I'm not in a good mood. This is the Clueless Aspirant part. I should be cheerful, shouldn't I, all the time? No, I was not cheerful. I was irritated. The plane was full, it was uncomfortable. And I had the middle seat. And sitting down next to me was this overly enthusiastic co-ed young college girl who had never flown before. And she said, what do I do with this thing? I said, it's a seat belt. It's a seat belt. You put it on here. And I'm going that. So I'm kind of trying to pretend that I'm sleeping. And she says, do you know who's on this plane? I'm thinking, with my luck, Fidel Castro. Oh. She says, no. Bishop Fulton Sheen, Archbishop Sheen. Now, there's a story about him. He's actually very, very close to sainthood. Now, he was then the Archbishop of the Rochester Diocese. Before that, he had been the Roman Catholic Defender of the Faith, which is a very big position in the Vatican. And he had gotten in trouble in Rochester a little bit because he was giving away church property to the poor. This did not make everybody pleased. He had in probably the late 1950s, an extremely popular network television show where basically he was talking about Roman Catholic doctrine, but it was so popular, he was so good, it was so entertaining that it had very high ratings on the network. And I'd remembered as a teenager, although being Jewish and we didn't know about this Jesus guy, he was fascinating. So I kind of followed his career. And I was sitting there, I said, but he's 6'4" and he's got dark black hair. I didn't see him. I said to the girl, is he in first class? She said, no, he's in coach, just up about 10 rows. I said, really? And then I'm thinking to myself, I have a battle between my Baba curiosity proselytizing mind and my lower don't humiliate yourself again mind. Part of me says, does he really know the good stuff? does he know mysticism? Does he know about reincarnation and stuff like that? What do the guys who are really high up in the church know? Whether or not they're willing to share it. The other part of the mindset, well, it's an interesting question, but you're not going to get it answered. And so Allan A said, I do have, how would I talk to him, about this without getting shoved back in my seat? The friend says, you can't. I mean, what are you going to do? Tell him Christ is back or something like that? By the way, I happen to be passing down the row. The other friend says, yeah, I know, I understand that, but and I don't want to make him comfortable, but wouldn't it be nice to, well, okay, I'm not going to find out about what he knows, but maybe I can give him something from Baba. The other says, don't waste your time. You're talking about the church here. He's just going to think you're a dumb jerk, Jewish at that. And the other, yeah, but, and then I realized I had this book with me, God in a Pill. I said, okay. So the two parts of my mind agreed. All you're going to do is you're going to go up there, you're going to say you're a psychologist, give them the pamphlet. Okay? You won't get killed, it's a nice thing. So I kind of screw up my courage and go up, and I finally find the guy. He's not 6'4", he's 5'3". TV is magical. He doesn't have dark black hair, he has gray hair. And so I said, and he's reading a book called Violence and Nonviolence. So I said, excuse me, Bishop Sheen, I'm a psychologist, I work with kids with drugs, and I thought you might be interested in this pamphlet. And I started to leave, he says, well, come on, sit down. I said, sit down? There was a seat next to him. And we sat down, and I realized right away, this is a very sweet man. And we just generally chatted about youth and this and that. And I'm thinking, how am I gonna, I got a shot at this, maybe. How am I gonna ask him about the good stuff? And I said, you agreed you were not going to mess with this. Shut up, just be nice. So I was. And then all of a sudden, he turns to me and he says, what do you think we should do about the church? I said, what did he just say? He's asking me what they should do about the church? I don't believe it. And then I said, I waited a minute and I said, okay, this is the chance. This is the chance. And I might as well be honest with him. So I started off slow. I said, well, one thing you might think about is having the priests talk a little bit more about spirituality, because a lot of the young people are very interested in spiritual things now. And, they're involved in a lot of social work, but there's a real hunger out there for spiritual meaning, and he nods. And then I said, what the hell? I'm going for the big one. I've got him. I said, second thing is, it's probably time to bring reincarnation back. The heaven and hell thing has worked for certain things. But particularly young people can't quite imagine a compassionate God who creates devastatingly terrible circumstances for some individuals in different countries. And they don't even see a missionary, So I think it'd be great if you could just bring it back. So I knew they used to teach it. So I knew that he would not answer me verbally, because as reliable as he might have thought I was, I could get him in deep trouble if he gave the wrong answer. But he just looked back at me and he smiled. And he said, maybe I'll do a TV show on mysticism. And so he let me know that he knew. Then I was truly emboldened. And I happen to have a copy of the discourses with me. I said, well, you might enjoy this too. He takes the discourses, he flips it, and it opens to the chapter, Violence and Nonviolence. Wow. And he looks at me and he says, oh my. Later, I was to find that Phyllis Frederick of the Los Angeles group liked him also and sent him a photograph of Baba in his most Jesus-looking, something like that one, saying that it might be an enjoyable, you might enjoy it. And got a response back saying, thank you for the lovely photograph of our Lord. I said, well, that's very complimentary. And I said, wait a minute. They didn't have cameras at Jesus' time. Whoa. So that, I was very pleased. And certainly, they're working out the sainthood now. And although I haven't gotten any more corroboration about this, nonetheless, Baba will do these kind of things. What we'll see tomorrow is a slice of a program done in the now fifth most sacred place in Roman Catholicism in San Francisco, an event that the Sufis put on in honor of St. Francis. And some of the priests in the diocese were not totally delighted about this, but it was supported by some very important political people. And a number of Baba people had infiltrated the church pretty nicely at reasonably high levels. And you'll see a piece of that. All of this takes on more coincidence here because of Francis Brabazon. So the place is a replica of St. Francis's small chapel in Assisi, in the city named after St. Francis, San Francisco, with a pope named Francis and a Brabazon named Francis. Come on, is this a coincidence? No coincidence. We're gonna take a peek at that tomorrow, just to give you a little bit of an idea of what's going on. So we're now looking at, one of the nice central things about Baba and his role, and that is, he said he came for all creation, and his job is to bump up the consciousness of all of creation. And that means every sincere seeker everywhere. And that means transforming and destroying the rigidities of the old religions and bringing them together on a single string. And it's happening both at an accelerating pace, the whole interfaith movement, but it also has great opposition which is required. Fundamentalists are not happy about interfaith stuff, as you've noticed lately. But that's kind of necessary opposition. I had one time, I got myself involved, the Clueless Aspirant strikes again, in the middle of a terrorist conspiracy. Now, in terms of recording, I'm going to change the name of peoples and places, all right? And I had already had a flirtation with liking, in my younger days, spy stuff and intelligence and this kind of thing, like thrillers like that. So I'm in San Francisco and I get a call from a good friend who's a Baba lover, but she's a very, very attractive actress who's highly brilliant, curious, and bold, and likes to investigate almost everything. She had once before gotten me the label of suppressive in Scientology when I had to kind of rescue her from the wild Scientologists because she knew too much about them. So I get a call, and she gives me the story about one of the new movements, the New Age religion movements that she was involved in that had gone bad. And that the people, she said, who were in that church had spiked her latte with LSD in order to disrupt what, again, was thought to be somebody who had gotten into their infrastructure at a deep level, but who didn't buy it. She's Baba trained, you know. It's always wanting to help, but these people were not what they said they were. And she sounded hysterical. To tell you the truth, she sounded psychotic. So I flew down, and let's call her Sandra. Flew down to Southern California, and she was a mess. She was crying, she was hysterical, she was terrified. And I didn't know if she had had LSD or not, but she was not in good shape. So I took her out of her apartment, and I brought her to the hotel I was staying in. And things got crazier and crazier. She started, she went to the bathroom and came out as an Egyptian princess. It was like makeup. And then she started reading the Bible aloud on the balcony of the Holiday Inn. And I'm going nuts. I'm holding onto her leg, stuff like that. So I haven't, at this point yet, called on Baba for assistance, thinking, well, I'm a psychologist, I should be able to handle this. So it's 4 a.m. now. She says, let's call so-and-so. He knows about these things. The bank manager in San Jose. I said, Sandra, it's 4 o'clock in the morning. I don't think he's at work. I don't think he would appreciate being called. Well, while I was in the bathroom, she called the guy and started talking to him. And I said, give me the phone, Sandra. I said, John, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Sandra's having a very difficult time here. Extremely difficult time, but we're trying to. And the guy says, actually what she says is pretty true. He admits he's an undercover CIA guy who's been tracking this church for a long time. And what they had been doing is sucking in wealthy, attractive Americans to this cult and using them as couriers to go to the Middle East and fund the Palestinian terrorists at that time. Palestinian terrorists were hot. I said, are you serious? He says, yes. He says, don't do anything. I'll send a couple of men over to see if anybody's tracking you. So I get a call an hour later. The guy said, yeah, our guys down there have confirmed there's a car with some people there. They got you under surveillance. Now, look, do not answer the door. I'm going to send one of my people down from San Jose. Don't answer the door, even if it's hotel staff. Just stay there till my guy gets there. So now I am communicating with Baba and saying, all right, okay, this is interesting, but it's a little too interesting. So then, I know it sounds wild. Mershadu says, why don't you record a version of this? It'll be a good story sometime. So then she sneaks a call to another person. This other person was the executive producer of a movie series that started out, it's called Aliens. You know, that whole series. And somehow was friendly with her. And so he knocks on the door. I think it's the CIA agent, but it isn't. It's this guy. And nice looking man, and he actually was very good with her. So an hour later, the knock on the door again, and there is, out of the movies, the perfect hitman. You know, tall, dark hair, menacing, carrying a large toiletry kit, which I figured was not really a toiletry kit. He saw the producer, and he says, "We told you not to let anybody in." And the producer turns around and says, "What are you doing here?" They knew each other. It turns out they had both been mercenaries in the South African conflict. And later, Ray, my guy, said he was one of the biggest cocaine dealers in all of Southern California, on the side, as well as being a producer. So Ray kicked him out and then said, "All right, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to take the girl. You follow me in your car." He goes, "I can't," and we're going to get her out of town. She says, "I can't go any place without my cat. I gotta take my cat with me." The guy's rolling his eyes. And she said, "I just refuse to go unless you go." "All right, well, we'll go get your cat." So we sneak out the back door. He takes her into a car. I get into my car, and he takes off and does one of these movie chases. So he's going like 90 miles an hour through the streets of LA. I'm supposed to be following him. We're getting followed, apparently. He's twisting and turning. I said, "I don't believe this. I don't believe this." And we get to her apartment, and Ray says, "Look, you keep lookout for any trouble, and I'll get the cat." So then it was one of the funniest scenes. Here you've got this hitman on his hands and knees, crawling under the bed saying, "Here, kitty, kitty, kitty." And he finally gets the cat. We go hide out at another hotel and finally take her to the airport to go back to her mother. Well, we didn't know that she then left the airport, called the FBI, went to a vet to get her cat diagnosed also with LSD toxicity. Anyway, she finally the mother came and took her. You know, that incident certainly did not move my career path towards being an agent. But it was very interesting in terms, and I don't know what was really going on, but of Baba intervening with kind of false religious extremist organizations. And I think they finally successfully nailed these people. Although I've learned now not to name names, just in case they're still around. So a lot of the things we're kind of seeing, and I kind of saw that too, Baba gets up to these very, very interesting things. Very interesting things. So there was, the fact that this producer was a cocaine dealer, I mean, it all kind of worked in a very, very strange way. I'm going to give you a little lecture now on drugs and what, if people ask you about them, other than the fact that God said be careful with them, you can also share. So one of the classification of drugs that Meher Baba was most concerned about are what we call hallucinogens or psychedelics. And remember, I told you that included LSD, it includes mescaline, it includes psilocybin. Tony's an expert on psilocybin. Psilocybin, if you're Australian. And also kind of includes MDMA, which is called ecstasy, oftentimes, and definitely includes the active ingredient in marijuana. delta-9 trans tetrahydrocannabinol, which we call THC. From the esoteric side, in the old days, we worked with clairvoyants who could look at people's auras and could tell pretty much what they were using by the holes that were being poked in the auras by the drugs. I said, look, I happened to run across a guy from the Drug Enforcement Agency. That's the federal agency. That's the primary law enforcement agency with regard to drugs. And I said, and he was an open guy, and I told him a little bit about this psychic. He said, you think she'd be willing to do an experiment? I said, what? He says, well, if you come in Sunday, I can go in the lab, take out a whole mess of drugs that are not labeled and see if you can tell. I said I'd ask her. And Francis, who was the clairvoyant, said, sure, I'll do it. So we snuck into the lab one Sunday morning, and he would go in the back and have little vials of different drugs. And she would touch them and tell what their effects were. Totally accurately. And then at one point it got very dramatic, very dramatic. He brought out something that she's not going to be able to get this one. Very few people in America have ever even know this exists. It was called yen qi. Yen qi is a form of opium that's processed in a certain way in Southeast Asia. So she touches it, and she describes it exactly, and then suddenly she breaks down crying. What's wrong? What's wrong? What's wrong? And apparently her touching all this has gotten her a little, and she gets in contact with an opioid AA group in the astral world. And what they were telling her was how painful it was, how terribly painful it was to have died addicted, and how that craving was 100 times as intense. They had no body with which to process it. And they were pleading with her to tell everybody not ever to get in that position. So now obviously from a scientific point of view it's very difficult to talk about this as a side effect, but it really did work in the old Haight-Ashbury days of San Francisco. We even gave a questionnaire. Would you stop taking drugs if? The second highest response was, if you knew for sure your brain was being damaged. The highest response was, if a trusted psychic saw holes in your aura. That would get them. And anyway, of course Mayor Baba knew all of this as a context. And when he talked about the dangers of drugs, it was on an ordinary sense of being physical, mental, and spiritual. For him at that time, it was the spiritual element that was really critical because people were getting sidetracked from real spirituality. Now, currently, there's a lot more research going on. Ironically, right down Meher Baba's line, including people experimenting with LSD for the treatment of alcoholism. And the use of marijuana without the THC in it to treat serious child epileptic seizure disorders. Okay. So basically all of these drugs mess around with the brain's neurotransmitters as well as the astral body. We've got from a scientific point of view, you're 6 times more likely to be psychotic if you had a background of marijuana in your teenage years, on average, people who smoke marijuana's IQ goes down 8 points. And it seems to be taking these drugs recreationally seems to be associated with schizophrenia. Now, all of these things are very consistent with what happens when somebody's not only brain gets messed up with their neurotransmitters, but what happens to their astral energy body and possibly their subtle body, which means that they really can't function very well. Now, all of this is fixable, and there is such thing as astral rehab in ordinary life. But Baba was very, very straightforward. And the interesting thing is, friends of mine observed, Meher Baba never, there's nothing else we can remember where he intervened with political or cultural stuff. You know, he didn't mess around with politics. He didn't try to change governments. He didn't make comments on child abuse or whatever the fashionable disorder or criminality. But he did about this. So it turns out to be much more important than ordinarily people think of in terms of public health problems. Now, so in the United States, for example, now 1 in 12 people use illegal drugs. The winner in illegal drugs is marijuana, and 2 states have legalized it for small amounts of recreational use if you're 21 years old. Under, you know, the thought that A, it's not that bad for you, B, we could get tax money instead of having the cartels be importing, etc. But people have not been thinking about it in the correct way, according to the way I see it. And that is, there is no such thing as marijuana, really. What are we talking about? We're talking about a cannabis plant. If you chop the leaves up, it's marijuana. If you extract the oils and mix them with the leaves or keep the oils alone, it could be considered hashish. If you further process it, it can be considered what is now called wax, which is a super high concentration of THC, which is a psychedelic, and which, with a high enough dose, you can't tell the difference between that and LSD. The marijuana that's going around now has been bred to be a very, very high potency. So your old marijuana is not like the new marijuana. It's much, much stronger. And it can be, of course, eaten or smoked. So the controversy really should not be around marijuana. It should be around THC. And one wouldn't have a problem with marijuana if it didn't have THC in it. Well, I mean, there's a lot of carcinogens if you smoke it. But there are other chemicals that might, in fact, cannabinoids that might be useful for different kinds of medical procedures. So that kind of skews the debate. And if you're talking to people and you just keep it on the THC and not on, quotes, marijuana, you can get the point over. It's like the people who want to legalize marijuana, and I'm not saying you should go to jail for it, would they legalize cigars laced with LSD? Would they legalize cupcakes? Do you have cupcakes in Australia? Cupcakes with methamphetamine powder in it. And even the gung-ho people would say no. No, they wouldn't. But that's the principle here. The principle is that an extremely powerful hallucinogen exists in a smokable or edible form. So if we talk about THC, we really have a relatively healthy debate. And we can convince the proponents that, come to think of it, that's not good. And we have no evidence that it's the THC in marijuana that's producing any of the positive medical effects. And I think that's how we're going to have to try to reframe this whole issue. Laurent Weisberger tried to collect all the things that Bob had said about drugs, and he has a little book called something Delusion into Illusion, which takes it from a number of points of view. Baba knew, ganja of course is more the hashish. Baba knew exactly what these things did and how they could be, in limited circumstances, helpful. But also, since the work of the new humanity involves a functioning physical and emotional body, he would very much like to keep that harm down. And it was, I think, in one sense, a startling, not diversion, but kind of form of his teachings that was very unusual because it had real contemporary relevance and political and cultural relevance. Now, having said that, and I'm going to stop because we're about there, having said that, those of you who are worried about policy, there's no reason people should go to jail just for taking drugs, but you need some leverage in the system to get them help. And that's why pure legalization is a disaster. Because the one thing we know about, for example, the THC stuff, cannabis, is how sneaky it is. I myself know how sneaky it is. That alcohol, at least, good old brew, you get feedback. You know, don't you? Pretty soon what's happening. You know the next day. And it's pretty much out of your system in 24 hours. With THC, you don't know. The feedback, it works on your feedback mechanism, so you're not able to be aware of what's happening. And it stays in the body for at least 3 months. And the more you smoke, the more it builds up. So you think you're a moderate user, but you're not a moderate user. Anyway, from a policy point of view, I think we need a little bit of leverage, kind of like fines or citations for use, that allow the person or mandate them to get assessed to see if they're in trouble of getting dependent. And we need to educate people better in the schools. Now, granted, it's going to be tough to educate them with Baba's specific material, but that can be adapted. And his principles of the temporariness of the phenomena, of the fact that you can ask anybody, is this working for you? This is working for you? And you know that they'll know, and they may not say, no, it's not working for me. But they'll know that. And Baba has kind of given an additional force to it, and there's so much opposition that it must be a really good thing that he's doing, or else there wouldn't be that much opposition. Anyway, that's just kind of a practical summary of what you'll see the debate about these things is going to do, and what the social experiments will find, and what the amount of money that constituencies or states are going to have to spend in treatment that overcome the amount of money they're going to get from taxes. Okay, why don't we just hold off now and have some tea and come back in what?
What time can we go back?
How about 10 of? Quarter of? No, let's say 4, it's 3. 3:50, would that